are the host of War Stories on FBN, Colonel Oliver North, and from the Heritage Foundation, former CIA Deputy Division Chief for Korea, Bruce Klingner. All right, good evening, gentlemen. I'm going to start with you, General North.
I'll take the promotion.
Colonel North, sorry.
No, it's okay.
You deserve a promotion.
Comes with it.
But listen, it appears that we don't have much choice now. This rogue dictator is on his way to at least attempting to destroy us. So we have the economic sanctions aren't working. China ain't in it anymore. If you listen to the president's tweet today, we said, you know, you can't blame us for trying. So now the question is, can we resolve this issue through a cyber attack? We are hopefully more sophisticated than they are without a military approach.
Well, it is time for a reality check, Judge. You're right, because this is an existential threat to the United States, and it's serious. Look, the nuclear weapons and ICBM programs that the North Koreans and the Iranians are working on together, they've been joined at the hip since the Clinton administrations. In the 2 years since the sanctions on Iran were lifted by the Obama regime, and we airlifted, of course, $1.8 billion in cash to Tehran, the North Koreans have conducted more ICBM tests than in the last 2 decades.
Right.
I wonder how they're paying for it. I mean, think of it. Grass is a vegetable in North Korea. China is not going to help until Beijing feels the pain. So here are our options, and I'm fascinated to hear how they are perceived around town. One, the president needs to tell the G20 summit 2 days from now that any company doing any business whatsoever with the Democratic People's Republic of Korea and Iran can't do business in the United States. Number two, tell Japanese Prime Minister Abe the U.S. will support a change in the Japanese constitution to let them acquire nuclear weapons. Number three, tell the Chinese President Xi that it's time for regime change in Pyongyang. The fat dwarf Kim Jong-un has got to go. Number four, tell the Republic of Korea President Moon, who's going to be at the same summit, that we need the full THAAD deployment and the return of the U.S. tactical nukes that were there from 1960s all the way through 1991. And finally, if that doesn't work, we have enough conventional ordnance to turn North Korea into an overdone Pop-Tart.
All right, let me go to Bruce Klingner. All right, Bruce, you heard what the colonel was saying. Now, look, it appears that, I mean, China's got to already know that, you know, we're interested in a regime change. We clearly would be interested if North Korea has this nuclear weapon to give it to Japan to make sure they've got it, that Seoul's got it. But isn't there a risk in any military option to the people of South Korea?
Exactly. When I was at CIA and participated in war games and tabletop exercises, any kind of escalation of the conflict in that scenario would lead to, although the alliance won, hundreds of thousands of casualties, and that's before we estimated that North Korea had nuclear weapons. There are 25 million people in Seoul, 35 million in Tokyo. So any kind of conflict on the peninsula does risk all-out conflagration, including the use of nuclear weapons. Just to point out, we're focusing on the road mobile ICBM, but North Korea has already had a capability to hit the United States with a fixed missile they call the Unha, we call the Taepodong. When they successfully launched satellites in 2012 and last year, the South Korean Navy dredged up the stages of that missile from the ocean floor, and the estimates was that it's from a fixed launcher, but it had a capability of 10,000 kilometers or perhaps 13,000 kilometers. That's either 40% of the continental U.S. or all the way down to Miami. We still don't think they have the nuclear weapons for it, but clearly they're working on it.
But what they launched yesterday was not from a mobile launcher. Is that correct? So
no, I'm sorry, the one they did launch yesterday was from a mobile launcher, but they did previously have capability of hitting the continental U.S. What we've heard from at least 4 U.S. 4-star generals is that they assume, or have to assume for planning purposes, that North Korea already had the capability. Most outside experts don't think they're there yet. But clearly, even if we don't know where they are on the path of development, we know that their objective is to be able to not only threaten our allies and our bases at Guam, but also the continental U.S.
All right, gentlemen, I'm going to you, can we assume, and I know that I interviewed General John Kelly, Homeland Security, and he said there's no question they're going to have the capacity within the first term of the president. So can we assume that it is in the not too distant future that they'll have that ability? Given that you've got this lunatic, you've got his ability to hit the United States sooner than we expected, we have to take preemptive action. Yes, Colonel?
Well, look, I made the military action the 5th of 5.
But it's not.
We got to try all the rest of them first. Look, I was one of those guys that everybody said, if it's that important, send in the Marines. I'm a Marine. I don't want to send in the Marines unless we've exhausted every other possibility. And I just presented 4 others besides military action that haven't really been tried yet.
Yeah, but no, Colonel, with all due respect, you don't think that President Trump has already said to the president of China, Kim Jong-un, has to go? You don't think that...
No, whoa.
That was your third point.
What I said was, no. Look at...
Yes, it was.
Tell all of them at the summit here 2 days from now. Tell every one of them, nobody who does any business with this regime can do any business in the United States. It's a unilateral sanction. We don't need to wait for the UN to make another toothless resolution. We can do that tomorrow by executive order. And the fact is, everything that they've got came from somewhere else. And of course, the Iranians are a big supporter of this activity. The bottom line of it is the Chinese aren't going to help us. The Russians aren't going to help us until it hurts.
All right, and Dan, I'll go to you. With what is going on right now, do you think that the ability to stop this man is within our grasp, or do we have to get rid of him? I mean, I agree with what Colonel's saying. I don't think any more economic or diplomatic is going to work. So then what do we do?
Well, I think there's a misperception that we have used every option on the sanctions. That's simply not correct. When President Obama said North Korea is the most heavily sanctioned, the most cut-off nation on earth, he was flat out wrong. The U.S., the EU, the UN did things to Iran that we haven't done to North Korea. Last year was the first year that the U.S. had cumulatively sanctioned as many North Korean entities as we had cumulatively sanctioned those of Zimbabwe.
But with all due respect, do you think that Kim Jong-un cares about sanctions to his people?
Well, we can wean off the Chinese banks and businesses that have been engaging with North Korea using existing law. The last week, the Trump administration finally sanctioned a single Chinese bank. That's long overdue. I hope it's the tip of the iceberg, and that we'll see can have a dramatic effect on North Korea. And we don't need to wait for Beijing.
All right. Thank you both, Colonel Ollie North and Dan Klinger. Okay. And be sure to check out Colonel North's show, War Stories, on the Fox Business Network.